As a fan of UFC, you are more interested in the heavyweight league. However, a weight class of the UFC that has recently come into a lot of popularity, despite having undergone consideration to be shut down, is the UFC's Flyweight division. This happened due to the rivalry between two particular fighters. So, who are the 10 best fighters of all time in the UFC's Flyweight division? Keep watching to find out. Firstly, who are the top 3 greatest heavyweights in MMA history? The heavyweight division has traditionally been regarded as the most visible weight class in all fighting styles. The weight class has deep historical origins in boxing, and its significance has only transferred to the MMA world. Here we go with the top 3 list. The third on the list is Daniel Cormier. Although Daniel Cormier lost to Stipe Miocic in what was billed as the battle to crown the greatest heavyweight of all time at UFC 252, Cormier is still among the best at 265 pounds. He held the UFC and Strikeforce titles before retiring in 2020 with a record of 22-3, won no contest. He triumphed over Bigfoot Silva, Josh Barnett, and the aforementioned Miocic when competing at heavyweight. A successful run for the future Hall of Famer. In the second place, we have Stipe Miocic. For a good reason. Stipe Miocic is considered the greatest UFC heavyweight of all time. Miocic has conquered some of the heavyweight division's top competitors, and he now leads the division in title defenses. Throughout his career, the Ohio-based fighter defeated numerous current and previous champions over fighters like the aforementioned Cormier, Junior Dos Santos, Alistair Overeem, and Francis Ngannou. Scoring victories are achieved. Even if he is no longer the champion, Miocic is probably still working to establish his legacy. The greatest heavyweight fighter in MMA history is Fedor Emelianenko. Even though Dana White and the UFC have tarnished his legacy over the years, Fedor Emelianenko is still the greatest heavyweight of all time. Although the Russian never entered a UFC cage, it's important to note that Emelianenko competed in Pride, which had the strongest heavyweight division during his prime. He developed into a dominant champion along the way. He defeated well-known fighters, including Andrei Arlovsky, Mark Coleman, Kevin Randleman, Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira, and Mirko Cro Cop during his 27-fight winning streak. The fact that he has never competed in the UFC has been criticized throughout his career, yet he has still defeated a startling 7 former UFC champions. The 10 best fighters of all time in the UFC's Flyweight division ranked. Since its debut in the UFC in 2012, the Flyweight division has been a weight class that is frequently disregarded. The UFC has contemplated ending the Flyweight division, most recently in 2019. However, the competition between Deiveson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno has really helped the category become very popular. Following Figueiredo's triumph over Moreno in their trilogy match at UFC 270, both combatants have solidified their reputations as some of the finest 125-pound competitors in history. The two champs are just some who are excellent though. On the bottom of the top 10 list is Alexandre Pantoja. Despite being in the UFC for 5 years, Alexandre Pantoja has had a significant impact, with a current professional record of 24-5. With victories over notable opponents, Pantoja has cemented his status as one of the world's top flyweights. At the moment, Pantoja has triumphed against opponents like Kai Kara France, Manel Kape, and Brandon Moreno. He was scheduled to compete for the Flyweight Championship at UFC 270. After defeating former champion Moreno twice, but a knee injury kept him out of the fight. In the 9th position, we have Sergio Pettis. Sergio Pettis' lengthy tenure with the UFC was viewed as a failure. As the younger brother of Anthony, Pettis entered the UFC with a lot of fanfare, and Sergio needed some time to settle in. Once he did, though, he was electric. Pettis was one of the world's top flyweights at the height of his career, defeating notable opponents like Brandon Moreno and Joseph Benavidez. In 2020, Pettis left the UFC for Bellator, where he has since dominated. He most recently retained his Bellator belt with a knockout victory over Kyoji Horiguchi. Jussier Formiga comes in at the 8th position. One of the finest fighters in UFC history, Jussier Formiga has the terrible distinction of never competing for a title. Following a 4-bout winning streak in 2019, Formiga was considered for a championship fight, but the UFC considered eliminating the division. Therefore, he was never given the opportunity. Despite holding the promotion for 8 years, his resume is still outstanding. He defeated future champs Sergio Pettis and Deiveson Figueiredo along the way. He has also defeated Alexandre Pantoja, another well-known boxer on this list. Coming in 7th place, we have Kyoji Horiguchi. After joining the UFC in 2013, Kyoji Horiguchi quickly qualified for a title match against Demetrius Johnson. Although Horiguchi would be unsuccessful in pursuing UFC gold in 2015, he has spent the best of the previous 7 years demonstrating why he is one of the world's best fighters. Although Horiguchi left the UFC in 2016, After defeating Ali Bagautinov, his career outside of the UFC best reflects his place in flyweight history. After leaving, he quickly signed with Rising and has defeated notable opponents, including Ian McCall, Manel Kopp, and Darian Caldwell. Throughout his career as a competitor, he has also added championships from Bellator and the aforementioned Rising. In 6th place, we have John Dodson. The unpleasant circumstance of John Dodson being in the same division as Demetrius Johnson presented itself. Dodson lost weight after defeating TJ Dillashaw to claim the bantamweight championship of the 14th season of The Ultimate Fighter. Dodson went 5-2 inside the octagon and continued to compete in the division for the following 4 years. His 2 defeats came at the hands of Johnson, as previously stated, and he came close to defeating Mighty Mouse in their first fight at UFC on Fox 6. We are now halfway through the list. Stay with us. Coming in 5th place, we have Joseph Benavidez. John Dodson and Joseph Benavidez share the same problem, and Joseph Benavidez spent the best years of his career in a division under Demetrius Johnson's leadership. Benavidez went 10-2, losing only to Johnson from 2012 to 2017. At UFC 152, he also came close to defeating Mighty Mouse, but ultimately fell short by a split decision. Along the process, Benavidez won big fights against notable opponents, like Ian McCall, Jussier Formiga, Henry Cejudo, and more. As probably the greatest fighter who never captured a UFC championship, Benavidez has earned his place in history. In 4th place, we have Brandon Moreno. Even though Brandon Moreno recently lost the UFC flyweight belt, he is still one of the few to hold the 125-pound title. After losing on The Ultimate Fighter, Moreno entered the UFC with an 11-3 record, making him one of the greatest underdog stories in MMA history. In his first UFC stint, Moreno displayed glimpses, but he was released in 2018 after a 2-fight losing streak. The following year, he was re-signed and went on a wild run. In his subsequent 6 fights, Moreno went 4-0-2 and captured the UFC Flyweight Championship. He currently has a 1-1-1 series record against Davison Figueiredo, and it appears he will have another chance to win the UFC Championship. Now, we are entering the top 3 best flyweight fighters in the history of the UFC. In 3rd place, we have Davison Figueiredo. Before his opportunity at the vacant 125-pound gold in 2020, Figueiredo, the first person to win the UFC Flyweight Championship twice, went unnoticed. Figueiredo faced Joseph Benavidez as a little underdog, but he rapidly produced one of the most lopsided contests in history. Figueiredo brutalized the future Hall of Famer in 2 consecutive battles and won the UFC Championship. After that, he defeated Alex Perez and started fighting Brandon Moreno. His unprecedented second title triumph and qualifications gave him a tiny advantage over his Mexican rival in the all-time debate. The runner-up on this list is Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo is considered one of the best flyweights of all time because of his legendary exit from the sport. Before falling to Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez, Cejudo chalked up a few strong victories. After that, Cejudo returned to the drawing board and developed into one of the best fighters in history. To earn another chance at Johnson, Cejudo amassed victories against future Bellator champion Sergio Pettis and past title challenger Wilson Rice. He knocked out former bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw to finish his flyweight reign after defeating the then dominant title to exact revenge for his earlier loss. The best UFC flyweight fighter of all time is Demetrius Johnson. From 2012 until 2018, Demetrius Johnson competed at flyweight, solidifying his status as one of the best fighters. During that time, Johnson went 12-0-1, gaining UFC gold and becoming the champion with 11 straight championship defenses. Johnson won over lots of past, present, and future champions during this time. Henry Cejudo, Joseph Benavidez, John Dodson, and Kyoji Horiguchi were defeated by Mighty Mouse. All his title defenses and triumphs assured Johnson's status as one of the best boxers. Do you disagree with any of the positions on this list? And is there any fighter you think should have been on the top 10 list? Let us know in the comments section about other topics you would like us to feature. Please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.